Welcome everybody to Local Film Talk. This is the show where we talk to local filmmakers about the projects they're working on here in the Triangle. I'm your host, Bob Walters, as usual, and we are back again with Michael Howard. Thanks for joining us, man.
Thank you.
And this is actually the second in a proposed three-part series. Hopefully everything goes smoothly. Actually, we might do a fourth one if you want to talk about marketing and distribution and stuff at some point.
Sure.
But
to figure out what the hell all that is.
As soon as you figure that out, take some notes, we'll talk about it.
There you go.
But you are actually working on your first feature film, Where We're Meant to Be.
It's my second feature.
Second feature?
You forgot our last interview already.
Yeah, I guess that's a long time ago, man. So anyways, you are working on your second feature film, Where We're Meant to Be. And we've been talking to you throughout the process. The first time you had just finished pre-production and we're getting ready to shoot. And now you finished the production phase. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about how that went.
It went well. I mean, we successfully shot everything that we wanted to shoot. We shot right at the end of April. We began principal photography, and then we wrapped up about mid-July. It was about 2.5 months, but it was 23 days within that 2.5 months.
Now, that's what you planned on, right?
Yes.
That's the time you allotted?
Yeah, we had a couple extra days then, we kind of broke up some. We had different, scheduling or conflicts that way.
I was going to say, you had to deal with a lot of different people's schedules, some people flying in, that kind of stuff. So were there a lot of changes like that? Someone's schedule got messed up and you had to move some dates around?
Yeah, sometimes it was scheduling, sometimes it was weather. We ran into one where we shot half the day and then we had to shoot outside and we had rain issues, and so that got moved to another day. So that kind of became 2 days, even though it was officially one day on the schedule. So 23, was 19, and then just kind of spread from there. So
I gotta say, a good portion of what I've seen so far takes place outside. So yeah, the fact that you had as much cooperation with the weather as you did.
Yeah, we got fairly lucky. Our first day of filming, really, we almost got rained out, but we kind of stuck through it, and we had a bunch of umbrellas over the cameras and all that. It wasn't too heavy of a rain, but it actually worked better because it kind of worked better for the scene. Like when you see it, it just kind of gives it a little, it fits it a little bit more appropriately. And so that one worked well for us, but the other days, yeah.
You lucked out because rain machines are expensive.
Yeah, they are, yes.
Well, cool. So what, did you have many reshoots?
We did one reshoot. We didn't do it because we had to, but it was for the good of the film that we did. The actors did great, but it was we had filmed it in a smaller kitchen. It was a kitchen scene between a husband and wife, and because of how small it was a great location, but it really limited us on being able to light it properly, and we had to go handheld. And we use handheld just for a few scenes in the film, and they're all kind of justified with why it's handheld. Most of the film is very, fluid and static. We have a lot of dolly and Steadicam, and it all kind of serves a purpose. And so after the fact, I liked the performances, but I sat with Chris Medica, our cinematographer, and we were talking about the scenes that we'd done so far, and we both agreed that kind of wasn't our favorite. And so we talked. Chris is a chef and has an amazing
And it's not because
kitchen.
you didn't like the scene, just to be clear. It's not like you didn't like the scene, like you said, you didn't like the performances. It's just that the look you got with the handheld and all that stuff wasn't what you wanted.
Yeah, because with handheld, when not much is handheld and then you go to handheld, it's kind of saying something, subconsciously. There's subtle shifts for the audience, and this is actually a very sweet kind of happy scene, but being handheld kind of goes against that a bit. And so Chris Medico, being a chef, has this amazing kitchen and said, well, we can use that. And so we talked about just kind of reshooting that. And so we talked to the actors and said, you did a great job, but I think it'll be better for the film itself if we have something where we can light you a little better and use, kind of, dolly shots and steady, static shots and things like that to kind of better suit the mood of what's going on. And they were on board with it, luckily. And so we ended up reshooting that scene, and I think it'll work much better for the film itself.
Right. Now that kind of gets into the workflow of the thing. How quickly were you able to turn around and watch the footage you'd shot on a given day and decide if you needed to go back and redo something or if you got what you wanted?
Well, we shot in 4K, but we had 1080 versions as well, and so we could look at those.
Recording on a separate drive in 1080, or you just downscaled it?
Exactly, yeah. It recorded in 2. We had the full 4K, the 1080, and so we could look at the 1080. We didn't watch it as dailies per se, but enough to kind of see, all right, that works. And there was one where we had 2 people that were in a scene, and we were running out of daylight, and so we had to make sure that those matched. And so Chris went home that night and checked it at his house and said, okay, here's this, and he checked it out and made sure we could pull up the levels on the darker part and bring it down on the lighter part, and kind of meet halfway in the middle and find that right balance. And luckily we were able to. But things like that, yeah, it was definitely advantageous to be able to look at it and be like, all right, we're good, now we can move on, happily knowing we have it, and then wait until editing to really get into the visuals.
Now you're talking about how you guys had to color correct that scene, and one thing that I've always wondered is, back in the day when you shot on film and you weren't able to do as much tweaking in post-production as you can these days, you used to really have to get the image you wanted in camera. But nowadays, because you can do so much digitally and so much in post-production, the strategy for most people seems to be to shoot a really flat image with lots of information, raw files and everything, and then you go back and tweak the colors to match and everything in post and get the look you want. Is that the way you guys did it?
We did, yes and no, because I think one of the things that people don't really think about is like we shot an S-Log. You can shoot like an S-Log in RAW and have all this dynamic range to play with in post-production, to where you can bring brights here and play with colors there. But it's not so much that you just show up and you shoot a flat image, and now you
still
can
got to light
build all of
everything.
these things. Yeah. So so Chris would go and we would he'd get lighting set up and we would get everything that we wanted. But then when we shot it S-Log, it gave it that very flat. So if you looked at it just out of camera, you'd be like, oh, this doesn't, there's no color here or anything like that. Because knowing once you add those things in post, you can play with it. And so maybe that light that you had on that was lighting them, you can make that a little more stark. You can bring the background around them a little darker so they're a little more solo, in the frame. And so that's where you have those tweaks that you can play with. But it's still really important to light knowing that you're going to be doing that, because you still want to have certain key lights and, like a rim light or things like that, so that when you get in there, you can build on those things and
it's all still got to be there. That the shadow has to be where you want it to be, and the highlights and all that stuff. You just can't create a backlight.
Exactly.
But like you said, the what you record is a lot flatter. So if later on you want to bring up the blues here or the yellow in the background or something, you can tweak that exactly the way you want.
It gives you a lot of leeway in editing to kind of play with it and just kind of really build onto it more.
Did you guys do much of that throughout the process? Like you'd shoot it and then Chris would go home and tweak it one night and send it to you and say, "This is what we're able to do with the footage. Is this the look you want?"
Not so much. We kind of knew that that's where it was going, and so we were focused more on the shooting and getting everything in that regard, knowing that the coloring would be there later on. But there was a couple times where we'd put something together just to kind of see how it was looking, and then Chris would go through and apply different color corrections, or even like a basic one throughout, just to kind of see, okay, that's how we want it to be, especially with 4K and all of that, making sure that this was going to do what we wanted it to do, because it was kind of new for us to be shooting in that format, and make sure that it's doing what we want it to end up being.
Is this your first time shooting in 4K? It's pretty cool.
It's cool, but I mean, it's a beast. I mean, there are a lot of things things you have to do extra with it. Just the amount of data and all of that you have to worry about.
How much hard drive space does this film take up?
Oh God, we have an array of RAID of 15 gigs, and I think most of that was almost filled. I mean, we were going through a ton, just because it takes up so much room. And
that's just the drives on the camera. You're not even talking about the computer where all this.
Oh yeah, you have those, and they'll shoot for 40 minutes or whatever, and then that drive is full, and then you have to go transfer all of that and have your next one, or get it before the next day. And so Chris spent a lot of time managing that data and transferring it off, and because we would back it up in 2 drives before we would erase it, because you want to make sure you have that backed up.
Yeah, that's the other thing, is that you probably got duplicates of everything, because you can't afford to lose a take or a scene or something, or have that one file that's a little corrupted and it's glitchy or something. That happens every now and then when we're doing these interviews. It's no big deal, because it's just a little interview, and if there's a little glitch in the corner, nobody cares. But you're talking about your feature film that you want to take out to festivals and maybe even get into theaters and stuff. You can't have a janky image somewhere.
Yeah, and on 4K, it's all right there.
Right.
You know, it's all very crystal clear, and so yeah, you have to be careful with it. But yeah, just the amount of data itself is huge, and then you got to think about all the things that are playing that, the editing programs and the coloring and all of that have to process all of these heavy, files in the end to finalize your film. So all of those things, 4K is much more demanding on.
That's why that's why video editing computers are the biggest beasts out there. When people are like, how powerful does my computer have to be? It's like, well, it depends on what you're trying to doing. And if you say video editing, they're like, oh, well, that's up here.
Yeah, you're not going to go to Best Buy and get whatever laptop they have on display and be like, all right, I can edit on this.
Right. That is not the $900 Dell system you get from Best Buy or Target.
Yep.
So let's backtrack a little bit and tell us a little bit about this story, because like I said, this is part of a series where we're kind of talking about the different stages of production. So tell us a little bit about what the film is about, and I guess some of what changed from post-production to production.
Well, the story itself it's a series of different stories. We kind of go in and out of these different lives, kind of at the pivotal moments, and we see how they connect. So really, it's kind of the theme itself that's overall.
Is this drama or comedy?
It's a drama for the most part. There's some comedy in it, but it's mainly a drama. And so, the theme of it is kind of, the lives that we have and how those are connecting to other people and how we're causing changes in their lives, or how our lives have been impacted because of them. And so we see some of these very direct connections from one person to another, and as we go from a story to a different story, and how that is totally different because of that one little thing. And it can be something tiny and indirect, or it can be something huge and impactful, and we see those at these various stages for these various stories.
Right. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, so I hopefully it draws people in and kind of gives them these different types, because we can kind of play with that as we go from story to story. That one is maybe more of a kind of romantic, straightforward story of a relationship, and then we have a crime story where someone is kidnapped, and there's a lot heavier of stuff going on, but you can kind of see how one goes into the other and how those characters from one lead to the next.
Well, that lets you play with the genres a little bit too.
Yeah.
Cool. How many different stories are there?
There's about 8 different stories, and some of them have, like I said, character will go from one to another, and they'll kind of connect us, but then once we leave that story, that's it. We're going on to another one. It's more linear than something like Crash or Pulp Fiction, where we kind of go back and forth with them. So you'll see it, you'll see how it connects to the next one, and then you're in that story, and then someone from that story will take us to the next one in a different way. And so story 6 doesn't have someone from story 2 in it.
So you wrote it, wrote the story, and obviously are directing it. So tell us a little bit about if anything changed from the script to the shooting, things that changed because possibly of logistical reasons. Sometimes depending on who you cast, there may be changes you have to make to the script.
Yeah, for the most part, it stayed the same. I had a very particular idea of how I wanted everything to go, and with the different stories, they really needed to feed into one another in a very specific way, and so not much could change in that way without really changing the overall story.
Right, it's pretty intricate. You can't make sweeping changes once you start.
Yeah, and you can't just like drop something out because then it doesn't connect or it doesn't make as much sense or whatever. So it was pretty tight script in that regard. One thing that we had to change was because of a location. We were supposed to, and we might have talked about this in the other one, but we were supposed to shoot at the NC Museum of Art. And so we'd had numerous meetings with them, and we were going to shoot in there. And the location fell through like 10 days before we were supposed to shoot there. And that's when we had our SAG actors coming in and a bunch of extras and all of these things. And it's a very big scene, and it's a very particular scene, so you can't just move it to someone's apartment or a restaurant or something like that. It has to be that type of location.
And 10 days ahead of time, you've already got everything blocked off, and you've probably taken location shots and framed everything up and everything.
Yeah, and because the day before that, we were closing down this restaurant for these actors. The day after that, we were closing down the street for these. So it was literally only this Monday that we could film. And so, you have limitations there of finding a new place too that can allow you to do it on a Monday, wherever it's going to be. And so luckily with pre-production, we had scouted out different art galleries and things like that we were going to use. And so we went back to one that we had looked at that was really small and kind of more intimate rather than this big art gala opening. And so that one required a rewrite to make sure that what they were doing, the way the actors were moving and the things they were saying fit into this new location instead. And so there was a bit of a change. They're not talking about looking at
17th century Italian Renaissance art when they're in a little gallery.
Exactly,
in the corner.
So so this was dealing more with a modern art thing, but the cool thing about it was the place that we used was actually a much better location in regards to the story, because now it was an art gallery where we could kind of go in and out of the artist bays where they were midway through works. And so we could kind of see these half-produced things that were being worked on as they were weaving in that, and then they end up where they're at in the gallery, whereas the other one was more about kind of this, swanky big art gallery thing, whereas now it became more of a kind of cool, more low-key one. And so it works, I think, better for the story, but they're both very different locations.
Sounds more visually interesting, too.
Yeah, because we can kind of get him kind of going in and out of the crowd a little bit more, whereas the other one you kind of just saw him going, and now it's kind of he's kind of walking after and stuff. So it's more interesting.
Well, that's cool. So you're talking about, you touched on the restaurant and the street and, the art gallery. Talk a little bit about, because I've never... I've been on a couple shoots myself. I shot a short film a couple years ago, and I've never been in a situation where I actually had to, or got to, depending on how you look at it, actually, rent a place out or shut it down completely just for filming. So tell us a little bit what that's like, what kind of logistics go into that.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, a lot of it's just with the pre-planning, going out there and finding the right place. I mean, we shut down streets in Apex, we shut down restaurants in Raleigh, a hospital in Durham. We had that for a whole Sunday that, we had a whole wing of this hospital that we were able to shoot in. So, a lot of it is just going and finding places. One, it's finding the right place sometimes. I mean, I looked at every restaurant almost in Raleigh that is closed on a Sunday trying to find the right one. And you got to find the right one that looks good for the shots you want. And it's supposed to be at night, but we're shooting during daytime, so it can't be near any windows.
Right.
And so really just kind of narrowing it down and finding ones that work, and then you got to get them to agree to it and stuff. So we found Zinda New Asian in Raleigh shut it down for a Sunday for us, or they were closed on a Sunday, so they came in and opened for us and allowed us to shoot there all day. Finding things like that, it's great because you have that ability to kind of control your atmosphere and be able to do what you want in there without having to stop and restart because, other customers are around or someone's in the shot or it's not working for whatever reason.
Right, you can tell everybody else in the room to shut the fuck up because they're hired actors and they're part of the scene as opposed
so
to when you're in a public
it's more
place.
Controlled, And so like when we shut down the street in Apex, they were awesome for us. And Captain Gilbert of the Apex Police Department was, he had officers out and they were at ends of the road, and so we had our actors walking down the street, and the scene is like a drunk guy who kind of stumbles in traffic and stops a car and kicks the vehicle and keeps going. So those things we were able to kind of safely and securely get that area.
Right.
And everybody was really cool about it. Roxborough was cool about it. Fuquay Arena, we didn't end up shooting there, shutting down, but they were willing to shut down the street for us. So a lot of these places, if you can just get in there and talk to them about what it is and the project, they're willing to work with you and do some pretty cool things.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's been my experience. Is that a lot of it is just asking and showing people that you know what you're talking about, and they're usually pretty receptive and pretty helpful.
Yeah. Still costs money a lot of the time, but you have the ability to do it at least. So
now with the businesses, that's just dealing with the owners. But what is it like dealing with a municipality for something out in public? You're talking about shutting down streets and having officers block it off and everything. That sounds like a lot more paperwork.
Yeah, there's definitely more to it, and a lot of that kind of goes through, we apply for a place, a permit or whatever, do it, or they're doing it kind of on their end and figuring it out for us, and then, we kind of make it happen.
Were they used to working with film crews in Apex, or was this a new experience for them?
I don't think they've done it a whole lot. I think they were kind of open to the new experience of it as well. I'm sure they've done some things, but
they didn't have the forms all ready to just whip out and say, sign here.
Yeah. So Pamela, the line producer, talked to them a lot about getting those different things taken care of. Yeah, she's awesome. So yeah, she dealt with them a lot, and just lots of emails and lots of setups and stuff for them to kind of make it happen and say, okay, it's going to be this night from this window, this is when it happens, and then you just hope for good weather and everything to work out and go for it.
Nice. So like you said, this is about 8 different segments. You got a lot of different actors going on. Some of them are kids. I've seen a scene with teenagers in it. I don't know if you have any younger kids in it too. What's it like working with kids as opposed to adults? I mean, obviously, when you're doing a SAG-compliant production, there's a totally different set of rules for working with kids. But how did you find that whole experience?
Well, luckily with us, because the kids, the whole thing wasn't SAG, with all the actors and all of that, you still fall in just legal rules with the state, of what it is,
right.
The amount of hours they're able to work and how those things work. The teenager scene, they were of age, just playing teenagers, but we did have 3 kids that were in the film that were all, under the age of 12. And so, fortunately, we didn't need them for long stretches of certain days, but there were numerous days that they would be there. And so it was interesting just working with kids in general, just because it's a very different dynamic when you're talking to them and explaining something and kind of trying to make everything work with that. But the 3 kids that were doing it were all so awesome, and I'm very fortunate that they followed direction well, and they looked great and acted great, and it worked out real well.
Kids can be tough to work with, I hear. I haven't had to do it yet myself, but I hear that can be difficult. So it's great that you got some some great ones to work with. And like I said, I did see the scene with the teenagers, and they did an awesome job. So
they did, yeah. Stephanie Reinhardt and Eric Pastore, they nailed it. They played it really well, and thank you guys. Awesome.
Safety is a major concern. And, a lot of times it's even stuff that you wouldn't think about. So tell us a little bit about safety on your set, maybe some things that some safety concerns that you had to take into account that you wouldn't normally think would be issues.
Yeah, I mean, safety is key. I mean, that is absolutely number one. Even if it's a set in an apartment and you have light stands and things like that, you want to be safe so something's not falling on somebody or things like that, and everything's there, just because...
Sandbags are key.
Yeah. So we did have different things. Like, we had a gun, and it was a real gun and had blanks. There's no projectile, but there's still, people are concerned that something could happen, things could go wrong. Something in there. So we had.
I want to Brandon Lee this shit.
Yeah. So we had a professional armorer and made sure that every safety precaution at every part was taken when we were shooting on the streets. And Apex Police closed the streets. That everything was set as needed, that nobody was in any harm's way. We had, there was a part, where there's people that are falling on a pad and things like that. And so, it's critical overall. And if there's anything that's, unsafe, then hopefully people have the courage to stand and be like, I'm not doing that or whatever. But, that was something, in pre-production meetings and all that we talked about at every aspect, so that there was never any surprises, nobody was made to be uncomfortable, and that nobody was in danger, at any time. Everything was very, very specific and set up so that, there was no one's in harm.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I mean, like you were talking about, there's a scene outside on the street where the guy almost gets hit by the car, and he, drunkenly kicks it and everything. That is a stunt, and you may think it's real simply someone drives up and they slam on the brakes and the guy just kind of and kicks it, but that's you got to be careful that you have to talk with the driver, make sure
you go through it numerous times, and
because even he doesn't stop at the right time, you got a flattened actor, and that's no good. So, and you were talking about the people falling on pads. I assume this is not somebody getting thrown out a 3rd-story window type deal. I mean, this could be something as simple as somebody tripping over a rug. But even that, your actor can get seriously hurt if you think it's just going to be, all right, you walk and you trip and just stumble off camera. Somebody can get hurt doing that.
Yeah, so we'd have the pad off camera, so they had something to fall onto and break their fall rather than their hand and hurt their wrist or something like that. Yeah,
Right.
every little thing like that, we wanted to make sure that people were happy with it. And then we walked through it all. We made sure everybody was comfortable with it and saying, are you good with this for sure? You ready to do this? And there was no surprises or anything. And everybody was prepared and doing what they knew they needed and wanted to do and were happy to do. And so,
Right.
we made sure every piece of that was taken care of.
Now, did you have any stunt people?
Jack Harrison was, he's the one he was the armorer for the film. And so, he kind of walked through some of that there, his punch and some different things like that, he kind of talked to us about. And then some of the other things, like I said, with just falling on a pad and stuff was more about just making sure everything was there for the person to be taken care of if there was an issue. But, we didn't have too many stunts overall in the film, but when we did, everything was.
And did anybody need to get any training for anything, or was most of it able to be done with just plenty of rehearsal?
Plenty of rehearsal or on-set training where, like the firearm, making sure that this is how you handle the firearm, this is how it's cleared, this is how we check it to make sure there's nothing in it, you're the only one handling it, it goes to the armor to you do it, it goes right back to the armor, and so everything is very specifically taken care of, so there's no surprises. The gun's not just sitting on a prop table where people are like, oh, this does look real, this is pretty cool, and then it's out of sight for somebody, or something gets accidentally put in there, whatever, and so, everything very specifically taken care of.
Right. So all this stuff with safety and everything, is this all stuff that you already knew from previous experience on films, or did you kind of learn a lot of this stuff, about looking at things from a safety perspective and what kinds of safety precautions you have to take? Did you learn was that stuff you learned on production of this film?
It's a little of both. I mean, some of it, you write a scene in and it's a specific way of somebody falling or something like that, then you kind of want to look at that, or like, well, how do we protect them, or how do we make sure, like the guy walking across the street. It's like, all right, well, we know we're not just going to wait until there's a break in traffic and have them run out, that we want it more controlled. But certain things like with, the firearms and things like that, definitely, we had lessons, like I said, lessons on set and everything, and learning about that and making sure I had full understanding about that. And then the people that were involved, the cast that were involved in that scene and everything, had full understanding.
Right.
And then even extra precautions that even though it's, a firearm and you're seeing the muzzle flash and it ejects the, everything, that even though there's no projectile coming out, if I'm aiming the gun, here, or they're aiming the gun there, that we just kind of just go a little off kilter from the actor, so they feel a little more comfortable. If there ever was some sort of malfunction or whatever, it's not point blank at you.
Right.
It's a little off to the side, so it still works for the camera. But
Yeah,
there's
you
just
pull-
an
just do
extra
a little
little
camera trick
safety
with it,
precaution just in case.
And even with blanks, aren't there sometimes little pieces of plastic or something? I don't know anything about.
I think it depends
Prop
on the
guns,
kind, because I
yeah.
know that some, and that's like the Brandon Lee thing, that there was an old shell casing in there that they didn't know about that got jammed forward and came out, but
Right.
some of them are blocked and don't have anything except that little bit of flash that comes out.
Mm-hmm.
So
And these are the things you learn. when
yeah,
you-
now that's what you ask an armorer. You'd be like, all right, so is this the type that can do this? And and he was great about letting us know up front. This is not the type where anything is going to come out, and it's this, but it is a real gun, and so we treated it with the utmost respect and care that this is a real firearm, and treat it that way, because
And
you
it's
never
important
know
to
what
have
can
a
happen.
pro, in charge of this stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. He's a professional stuntman, and like I said, owns the weapons, knows all about it, and so he can come on and take care of all of that, rather than being like, well, I read about this on the internet, this is the type of gun for it, it should be fine, and that's where you run into those problems, and so that's not the place you want to take shortcuts.
Oh yeah, this was in the trunk of my car, just use this.
Yeah, it's not
I'm
the
gonna go
place
out
you want
and
to
take
take
a smoke
shortcuts
break.
or have any problems with, yeah.
So, so obviously that's one thing that you guys figured out on this. What other, what other things did you learn during the production process, and what advice would you give to other people? Don't do this. That's next time.
Yeah, I guess a couple of the biggest things. One would be pre-planning. You can never do enough pre-production.
Right,
You know,
right.
we did quite a bit of it, and you know, setting things up and getting locations, and you know, Chris and I working on, you know, how to make these visuals this way and all of that, and it was still not enough time for everything that we
Right,
really
right.
wanted to do, you know, and so it would come down to the fact that, you know, you had all the locations set up, but maybe you only had a 30-minute quick conversation about what we're doing with the camera that day. We know we need to do this and get this accomplished, and we want the Steadicam and the jib, but, you know, we didn't really kind of talk about the exact shots because, you know, there just wasn't the time.
Right,
And so the
right.
more time that you can put into getting things set up, the better it'll go. And so I think a lot of people kind of just show up and want to get things done. And I've worked on sets that have been that way, where you kind of show up and nobody's talked about anything. And they're like, all right, well, let's set them over here. And I guess if you put the camera here, we'll throw some lights there. And you're kind of sitting there watching this whole thing happen, waiting for it to go. And there's a lot of wasted time, and maybe things that they could have done better and had cooler shots had they thought about it, or, you know, planned ahead of time. And so I think just for every aspect of the production, it's going to go so much more smoothly, you know, if you show up and do it, you know, ahead of time. Or I say you make plans before showing up and doing it, and so
Right.
you have all of that set up. And then just with, you know, take time for the production itself. I think it's kind of a badge of honor that things go quickly for people, and sometimes it's to detriment of the production that they
Right,
say,
right.
well, I shot a feature film in 4 days, and it's like,
And
okay,
it
but you didn't
shows.
have to shoot it in 4 days. And, you know, maybe that's them with a handheld and just a couple people talking through most of the movie, and it does go faster. But I think people don't take enough time with their production. And I mean, to do certain types of shots and lighting and stuff, that all takes time. Every time you move that camera, that takes a lot of time. Anytime you're doing different things, that all takes time. And so, you know, I know with indie films, when you don't have, you know, a lot of money and a lot of time, it's, you know, you don't always have that luxury. But I
Right.
feel that sometimes something that happened in 1 day really could have taken 3, and, you know,
It could have
people
looked a
would have
lot
been on
better,
board
yeah.
with saying, yeah, I can do 3. It may have taken different weekends or whatever, but, you know, yeah, I think it's much better for your film overall if you don't do it quickly because you can, but, you know, take that time because you can. Or
Well,
you
theoretically,
want to.
you're making a movie because you want to make something cinematic, and you know these days, especially with DSLRs and even you know a smartphone, anybody can go out and record 90 minutes of footage, you know, of varying degrees of interest. But to actually make, you know, if you really want to make a film, you know, you want to try to make something cinematic, and like you said, that takes planning, that takes moving the
Yeah.
camera, that takes proper lighting, good audio, all that stuff. And you know, like you said, you gotta, you know, not dilly-dally, and hopefully you planned ahead of time so there's not a lot of downtime with people standing around while you try
Yeah.
different stuff out. You know, to actually, you know, take that time to figure out how to get a nice dolly shot, or to frame your shot and make sure all the, you know, items in the background are nice to give you a good picture and everything. That, you know, that takes time and it takes planning. And, you know, you're right. A lot of people thinking that the goal is to crank something out as fast as you can don't take the time to do that, and you end up with a lesser film because of it.
Yeah, and I mean, like, ours was really complicated just because there are so many actors and so many scenes and so many locations and all of that. And, you know, you look at 23 days of shooting and people are like, oh, that's so long and stuff. But in reality, you know, that was quick. I mean,
Right.
we did that, you know, 12-page scene, that was on a Sunday, and that was super quick. If you had, you know,
Shooting
the proper
12
time.
pages in 1 day is ridiculous.
Yeah, and we had 2 cameras, and so it took a lot of planning to really make sure that went as smoothly as possible. But
Because unlike this, you know, I'm sure people who are looking really closely at the frame, you can see a light stand and maybe a reflection of somebody, you know, a camera or something in a mirror. And that's okay because this is just an interview. But when you're shooting a narrative film, you know, you can't catch the, you know, the other camera in the shot or anything. You really got to plan that out.
yeah, and so don't be afraid of the planning. Don't be afraid of taking the time. And, you know, I know it's nice to be able to get it all done in a weekend, but if you can take that, you know, and really spread it out and really take the time with it, because yeah, you can show up and set up the camera and show up at 10 o'clock and the actors show up at 10:30 and you're going at 11, but like that 12-page scene, even then it was a couple hours of, you know, Chris Medico, and we had Joe Fried on set doing the second camera that day. of putting an individual light above every table, and so when we had that wide shot going in, you've got a very particular lighting look, you've got a very particular camera move, you've got everything set up in a certain way that, we can show up and we can use the natural lighting and be ready to go in 30 minutes and everybody do their thing, but, it's just, if you really take the time and plan things out and take the time during your production itself, I think you can have just so much, more production value and all of that, even on a low budget.
Right.
And I'm not saying you have to go take, 20 days or 30 days or, that, but take a little more time and a little more, putting a little more into it, and I think you can have a lot better results and, a lot nicer of stuff.
I think for a lot of people, the shooting is the fun, sexy part of the whole filmmaking process, getting out there and actually capturing the image on camera. And that's what everybody's looking forward to doing. But, like we're saying here, it's doing all that other stuff that helps you get a better image and taking the time to do that. Well, we've said it enough times, do plenty of planning. If you think you've done enough planning, do some more, and your shoot will hopefully go a lot smoother, a lot faster. Not in that you'll get done in fewer days, but you'll be more efficient.
Yeah.
And hopefully your film benefits from that.
Yeah, and I think one of the other big pieces of advice I can give, kind of tying into that, is be ready for anything to change. You can do all this pre-production, you can do all this planning, and things are going to go wrong. And
it might rain.
Yeah. And so I think, as a director, one of the best attributes you can have is just being ready to deal with problems, and deal with it the right way. Don't get stressed out and take it out on people. Just know, okay, this is not working, or we're not going to be able to do this. What can we do? There was a day where we were in an art gallery, and we were having camera problems. The hard drive wasn't recording, and we had extras showing up at a certain time, and we could only be in this gallery at this certain amount of time. And we had all of these different things that we were trying to make work with the projection system and all of that were having issues. And so, it comes down to the fact that you just surround yourself with good people that know what they're doing and are willing to help out, and keep your calm and just know, we got to fix this. What can we do? I can stomp around for 10 minutes and complain about how it's not working or get pissed off and snap at people and all that, but that's not going to be productive at all. So, but if I, keep my cool and say, all right, what can we do? Or go to the person that, knows about, all right, this camera thing isn't working. How can we shorten this? How can we make that work? Or go to them and say, we're short on time. Can we start moving some of this stuff out now so we can get these last 3 shots? Whatever the case is, I think just being able to kind of go with the flow and make those changes and be ready for them. You never know what's going to happen, but something will. It's never going to go perfectly. And so, if you can just be ready for it and go for it, then I think you'll be, it's going to go much better for your film, but it's also going to go better for the people that are there helping you out and are a part of it with you. And if you're
hopefully this, whatever you're working on, is not the end game. You want to do future projects, and you don't want to burn all your bridges, on this one.
Yeah.
Or you're not going to be able to get anybody to help you next time because these people won't want to help you, and the word will get around that you're a pain in the ass to work with. So.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I'm very proud of with this film, is that the crew that was put together, everybody was just amazingly awesome, and they worked together well. They all worked. They knew what they were doing, and those who didn't and were maybe coming on the film to get a little more experience and learning were so open to learning things. And it's like, all right, well, this is how we do the slate, and we would go over it, and then they were doing slates, and so just having people who are willing to be there and help you, respect their time, respect them as a person, and do everything you can to be thankful for that, just because they're the ones helping get your film done. And if they're not there helping lug stuff out or showing up, on day 14 to help you, set this up, or being, going over hours, or whatever the case is, your film is going to suffer for it. And so surrounding yourself with good people who know what they're doing and are personable, and you can all have, the laughs throughout and be professional when needed and all of that, and making all of that mixed together, I think, is key. And so, this film had that in spades, luckily. And thank you all so much.
What would you say was your favorite scene to shoot, and what was your least favorite?
My favorite scene to shoot would either be the restaurant scene that opens the film. We had our SAG actors in, we shut down the restaurant, we had just a lot of cool, fun stuff going on that day. And then there's one that we shot in Roxborough where we had this really cool warehouse, and a lot of the key crew stayed in Roxborough overnight, and so it's just kind of this little fun field trip of a weekend of filmmaking. And that scene we had, that was the crime scene, so there was firearms, and we had a weapons master on, and just a lot of different cool stuff happening. So I think just the whole buzz and excitement of that and shooting that scene was a lot of fun, and just the scene itself, just being able to direct that scene and have all these different things going on. And
how big was your crew?
The crew, we had just over 20 overall crew members, and I'd say about 10 or 15 of them were kind of the core crew members that were there for most of it, a good amount. Some we would only have for a short time or a few days here and there, kind of filling in when we really needed it,
right.
Or just, like the armorer, was there for, just that one day when he was needed. And so, but overall, 10 to 15 or so was the kind of core. And they were awesome. It's all about finding the right crew. And
right.
The crew on this, it couldn't have been done the same without them. They were there, they were personable, it was a fun experience, and they made everything work so smoothly and so well, and I couldn't have asked for a better crew. I'm very thankful for that.
Nice. Well, I think that about covers it for the actual production process. Mm-hmm. So real quick at the end, let's get a few, because now you're getting started on the post-production process. And again, we'll talk to you at the end of that process to find out, what that was like. But for now, maybe some predictors, I guess, or guesses, just to kind of help contrast expectations versus reality once it happens. About how long do you expect the post-production process to take?
About half of it is edited now. I'm hoping by the end of next week to have the full rough cut finished.
Oh, wow.
But really, it just kind of then depends on the coloring.
Now, you've been working on it for what, like a month now, editing?
It's kind of been on and off. There's been so much going on, after the film, and a little bit was happening during the film and all that. But yeah, it's kind of been on and off, throughout, grabbing stuff when I could. And then, coloring and sound mix and score and all of that have to be done as well. And so,
now, are you doing the editing, or is Chris Medico doing that?
I'm doing the editing. Chris is doing the coloring, and then we've got different sound and things going on with that.
Okay. And what are your thoughts on, you said scoring and everything. Is it mostly going to be an original score, or are you trying to get a couple songs in there?
There's a few songs that play throughout, and then the score will be kind of the thing kind of interconnecting it, and kind of the combining theme to kind of bring a lot of these stories together and kind of add to the moments of it.
Okay. Do you already have the songs and the bands lined up, or are you still going out to get those?
Some of them. Some we have in place, and others, I'm still working on now. So hopefully those will all work out, and we'll keep it going.
Well, cool. I appreciate it, man. Mm-hmm. Thanks for coming out and talking to us.
Yeah.
We'll get up with you again when you're at the end of the post-production process, talk about all that, and see where we're going from there. Because it's, like I said, what I've seen in the movie so far looks awesome, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it get out there in the world.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thanks.
All right. Take it easy.
All right.